All right, thank you so much for staying with Daybreak. The conversation still continues. It's like a post-mortem of the Madaraka Day celebrations, which was a legacy home run for the head of state, that is President Uhuru Kenyatta. He's the last as head of state here in Kenya right now. But they're still with me, Kevin Osido, Executive Director, County Governance Watch, is still with me. Dennis Ntumbi, Governance and Policy Expert, is also still with me here. Professor Tomo Gienda, Senior Counsel, had to leave because of a court matter that he's handling. But we still have some of your feedback, a lot of it coming through. In fact, let's bring that up and read some of them at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag DaybreakGakio. Jimmy says there was nothing to celebrate about yesterday when innocent children are killed and others displaced, while at the same time showcasing sophisticated military gear. That's an insult. Okay? Kipto Ruto says in this election, women have the option to either vote to have one woman representing them in two positions, that is DP and CS Justice, or vote to have 10 CSs representing them in the cabinet. Okay? Mandela says the two-thirds gender rule came through 2010 constitution. President Uhuru and his government aren't a pioneer government to that rule. Why is it that the panelists roasting President Uhuru for women agenda? Under Uhuru, we have had 8 women CSs, CJ, DCJ, Auditor General, etc. Okay. Remy Butia says good leaders speak to bring out their better nature and then speak to the public to bring out the public's better nature so that it magnifies and grows and then becomes dominant. President Uhuru should bring out his better nature. Okay? Bob Otieno Wino says President Uhuru erred in his speech of address by telling Kenyans what he has done for the last 9 years. Work in silence and let your success speak louder via citizens' appreciations, more so by seeing the fruits. Samuel Mogere says yesterday was not only Uhuru's day because he was not elected alone. He would have given the DP a chance to also give his remarks because the other day the DP was asking for forgiveness, so he would have considered that and indeed give him a chance. Okay. Prophet says President Uhuru Kenyatta is going home, and he repeated it. This election will be won by either Raila or Ruto. The president has a duty to unite this country. It is important for him not to allow any Kenyan to suffer after the elections. And Dennis, we were talking about his achievements earlier on. Yet they're all outlined here. 11,000 kilometers of roads, 13 trillion is in terms of GDP, 13 million Kenyans connected to clean water, constructed additional 1,912 healthcare facilities, 17.1 million people registered on NHIF. Let's take the one for 13 trillion. So he says in 9 years, we have moved from being the 12th largest economy in Africa to the 6th largest economy and still growing. You have almost tripled our GDP. But how come this is not being felt on the ground? In fact, most people are saying the times are harder now.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think because, you know, the reality is not felt. And one of the things that has happened is that within this economy, we have overborrowed and put it in major infrastructure assets within the nation, but at, you know, 3 times or 4 times or 5 times more to the cost, and also including the aspect of corruption that is there at the end of the day. We have invested in roads and all that, and that is good, but in times of a pandemic and Great Depression, yeah, you put money into the people, and we're not saying that roads are bad. For example, if you look at now the project that is the expressway to the airport, and the fact that they are saying now we have to do a small adjustments to get into the CBD, perhaps the cost is going to come to about 120 billion shillings. You look, that kind of money then would have been a type of a package that is given into almost about 15 counties to resuscitate the small businesses and to make sure that we manage the mushrooming informal sector, yeah, into a type of formality. When you look at the uptake of new jobs, I think within COVID and whatever it is, all the way from 2019, we had something about 78,000 new jobs, thereabout, if I'm not wrong, and against a backdrop of the informal sector generating to about, I think, 530,000 jobs thereabout. And this is the mama mbogas, the where. So I think the priority of where we put our money, the model of financing at the end of the day, is a concept that we need to review. And that's the reason why, personally speaking, I'm excited about the bottom-up economic model. Yeah. The US is adopting it. Many other economies are adopting it at the end of the day as the sure way to make sure that we finance the bottom of the pyramid, which is the producing is a producing bottom, by the way. 60% of our GDP is contributed from that bottom. You understand? But so if we negate that bottom, that is the producing aspect.
Yeah.
If we negate agriculture, if we negate certain critical aspects of what supports and grows our GDP, then it doesn't matter how much money we pump into economy. Then the what it is that they call the gross domestic happiness. You understand? The money that comes into your home to help you put food on the table, educate your children, and many other things is not going to be experienced. Well, Kenyans are wondering, where is this money circulating? The cost of living is astronomical. You know, if you find somebody today walking in town with 20 liters of cooking oil, that's a security risk. They'll be mugged. You understand? If you find somebody putting a full tank of fuel nowadays, it's dangerous for you to even drive around with that. So the truth is, I think we have to re-engineer the models of how we finance our economy. And we have to look critically at that bottom of the pyramid and ask the citizens to participate in terms of how they want to dictate the economy. Also, the factors of production, again, are captured by policy or whatever it is. Land, entrepreneurship, labor, and capital are things that are not accessible naturally to Kenyans. So I think we need to look at how do we finance our economy and factors within our economy that generate highly to the GDP and see then how do we change that model to sort of the bottom of the pyramid model and how do we get all Kenyans to participate, move that informal market into the formal, widen the tax base, because the 90%, most of it is not contributing to national building. They are not being taxed. The government does not relate with them from a policy perspective. The government doesn't even know them from law perspective. You understand? So, but there is great potential. You're finding PhDs selling moturas somewhere because that's the only way that he can make a living now before anybody considered them. You have an opening somewhere in a certain business, and then you find 20,000 applications. How do you even process them? And that's a job that is paying 50,000 shillings. And when you take tax away, you take home 28,000 shillings. So we have to relook at the model of our economy, kill bureaucracy, government bureaucracy, and ensure that there's access to affordable credit. And there are many other things that we need to review so for that economy to be felt.
All right, Kevin, how can this be felt? Because the numbers look pretty good. From 12th position to 6th, that's a jump. That is
that's a double good job. However, if you look at the indices that the president is using to be able to arrive at that kind of rank, they are global indicators. And I don't think it would be right for us to consider the Mama Mboga in Uganda to the one in Kenya and or South Africa or probably Tunisia. We have to localize the conversation so that, because the president from his speech, he's giving a scorecard which is a global, from a global perspective. And that is how the ranking has been done, looking at those particular indicators that are also compared to all the countries in Africa, because he's using this as, he's saying the economy has grown 6th in Africa. So we are looking at more than 200 plus countries, rather 50 plus countries, and probably even 200 plus if we were to consider global ranking. How do we therefore make this felt at the lowest level? And Trevor, from where I sit and interacting with a few government operatives, Kenya has done well in terms of making people want to be, take a very clear path in terms of informing how the money is being generated and how they ultimately get it back. However, if you look at the tax regime, and Dennis has alluded to this, how much does KRA pick from the least earner? Is it worth it? Is it necessary? Is it relevant compared to the degree of service delivery? So that if you say this tax relates to road levy, for example, how much of that contributes to making or repairing the road that is supposed to help this Mama Mboga or this boda rider to fight with certain challenges like bad road terrains? So that when it rains, vehicles or public service operators should not overburden and overcharge, people who use public service. The boda rider should not say barabara ni mbaya, so nitakulipa 70 other than 50. The conversation where then the normal citizen takes part in the budget-making process, because that's where it starts and ends. I don't think even if bottom-up was to be enhanced in Kenya, government will not pick money and throw it at people, you know, like Father Christmas, and, you know, it will not happen. There is a mechanism, there is a framework, which is what I think the Kenya Kwanza has not been very clear in terms of helping us understand what is this mechanism going to look like. Will the budget process change? Will county on source revenue, mechanisms be enhanced beyond the 110 streams that counties now have to engage in terms of raising their own revenues? And then moving forward to who ultimately makes the decision on the tax. How does KRA arrive at pay as you earn, for example? What are the indices? What are the measurements? Yeah, so that before you tell me that you are earning 100 and you have to give 24,000 to the exchequer, how? What are you? What are the modalities? And then remember that even as you take this money, the cost of fuel has gone up. And that is a conversation that is not happening at the grassroots, the bottom level. It is taking place up here. So what is the interaction between this bottom level and the decision-making policy legislative concerns at this apex level? There is that gap. And that is why I would really want to emphasize that the Jubilee government, for example, came up with the SME policy. The SME policy that is also supposed to give spaces to the common citizens. And my way of looking at it is strengthen networks so that the value chain is complete. The person who has the cow knows that when I ultimately milk my 12 liters, there is already a ready market. So that you don't have to keep these things somewhere in a kibuyu, waiting for some people, 2 or 3 people to come to your home to want to buy milk at a cost which is not residuate, in my view. There has to be a mechanism where at that locality we know how many cow milk farmers do we have around here. What is the number of liters they produce per day in the morning and also in the evening? What is the mechanism to collect this milk and take it to the nearest market? And you treat that from that local level to the sub-county level, to the county level, to the national level, and then we engage with the global markets, where at, like we see vehicles moving from Meru transporting Mira. There has to be a way in which we see farmers appreciating that, yes, we are planting coffee or Mira, whatever it is that we are planting, and that government interest is also there, so that we stop having conversations around high costs of fertilizers. What is the government doing to subsidize these fertilizers? We stop talking about coffee seeds that no longer work. What is the value of testing soils? Because Trevor, if we don't look at it that way, we will be disenfranchising and discouraging people who want to move from suits into gumboots and aprons, and then they'll be sitting at home waiting for politicians like they are right now.
And then it's these top echelons that Kevin is talking about. Is that where we get it wrong? By having the wrong people in office. The president gave an example of why he decided to go for the military personnel. They are disciplined, straightforward, and they have actually managed to deliver. He talked about KIMC, he talked about the shipyard in different places. But even now, in the political scene, we're already seeing the top leadership dishing out positions that are yet to be vetted. Is that where we get it wrong? By almost rewarding the political cronies and the loyalists instead of picking people who can actually run an institution in the right direction?
Absolutely, you're right. Policy in this country is more of a trickle-down thought process, as opposed to ensuring that public participation is not just putting people in a room and telling them what you want. It's putting people in a room and asking them to tell you what they want. Because Kenyans know what it is that they want, technically. There's a concept in terms of aid that giving someone a loaf of bread is actually, it's not a moral thing to do. You'd better give them cash because they know how to spend their money, technically. Trevor, yesterday, my wife and I sat our children and we said, you know what? For the next 2 months, we are not going to buy milk. We can no longer afford it. Because we have to prioritize. We have to wonder, do we keep you in school or do we get you to drink milk daily? So families are prioritizing like that. But going back in terms of the policy, what it is that I need to say is that there are state officers who make decisions that are out of touch. And why I'm asking that is because we are putting a lot of money on roads, electricity. They are good. but now they are inaccessible. You understand?
Because even the electricity, you can't afford it.
You can't afford electricity.
It's there, but
it's expensive.
Yeah.
Driving on those roads, you need to be rich. If when you find the guys who are driving on top, they have to be richer on that expressway to the airport.
There's a toll.
And the guys who are driving below, you know, of course, it means that they'll be stuck in traffic and they'll be spending more money. You understand? So I've been using matatus for the last 1 month because every time I take out the car, I have to fork more money than I can feed my family. And I can't be driving them in a car and I cannot feed them. So we have to prioritize. So we are building all this infrastructure, but Kenyans cannot access the infrastructure. All these great hospitals, but we can't access those hospitals because we haven't addressed the basics of cost. We haven't addressed the cost of living. We haven't reviewed the tax regime. Yeah. You understand? We are not conscious of the times. We are not conscious of job losses. There are so many things that the political class is out of touch with. And that's the reason why I told you the other day I sat in what Kenya Kwanza is doing, what UDA specifically is doing, which is basically the validation of the regional economic charters. And I listened to Mwananchi talking, and I was like, wait a minute. This nation has lived on an imagination that doesn't include Kenyans at all. For example, Nyeri County came and said, I think it was Laikipia. Laikipia County said that, you know, we have the capacity to produce organic fertilizer. But we have tried to apply for a license to start producing this. For the last 7 years, the state has refused for us to produce. This is organic. It's there, like just go and do something about it, package it and sell it. You understand? Anyone who today tries to start a supermarket, you have almost about 15 licenses to contend with. You know, so the cost of doing business is unbearable. Yeah. The cost of production is unbearable. So policy is what advises the law, is what advises how government executes its relationships and how it generates funds. But if this policy is a trickle-down effect, it's an imagination of 4 at the top, imagining for the 57 below, then they are completely out of touch. And then the way the blue economy in Mombasa, you can't do a manifesto that is your own imagination extrapolating the entire country. The aspirations in Mombasa are not the aspirations in Laikipia, are not the aspirations in Embu. For example, when you look like at a county like Embu, you realize that 27 years ago, it used to be the greatest livestock market that there ever was. If you drive around Mbere district, you realize that, you know, there's a cow dip here, a cow dip there, and a cow dip there. Yet there's no tannery. They used to produce, you know, a lot of pyrethrum and many other things. Yeah. A lot of those economic things have died, and therefore, those communities that were supported by that economic activities are no longer surviving at the end of the day. So even as we do the infrastructure, the infrastructure must be advised by the economic activity, because the infrastructure must support the economic activity. So you can't build roads that the farmer cannot access, because if he accesses those roads by way of vehicle, whatever it is, then there's no profit that goes back to him. Okay. So we have to be conscious that whenever we generate policy, then policy must adopt itself to Article 43 of the Constitution. And that is then giving Kenyan the socio-economic liberation. It is not basically driving them out of business or driving them out of, you know, the ability to own a livelihood.
All right, Kevin, we're running out of time here, but I'll allow you to make closing remarks really quick, because the President said something that while we claim improvement, we can't claim perfection. There's a lot to be done. So where do we head as a country now? 68 days to the polls as you close.
68 days to the polls, without necessarily focusing on the elections, let's look at the interaction between the politician and the reality on the ground. A lot of times we support good people to run for office, and ultimately they turn to be bad people. Bad people in the sense that they do not, therefore, continue the conversations around the campaigns. He's speaking about what Kenya Kwanza is doing in terms of these regional economic charters. Unfortunately, Trevor, there is no commitment by the Kenya Kwanza leadership and by and large the presidential candidate in terms of affixing a signature to the commitments of what the people are saying. A lot of these conversations are happening, and citizens are being convened even by their own counties. Yeah. And we are doing the third generation county integrated development planning today as we head into the third county governments. What is the voices of the citizens in those conversations, and what is the commitment by the leadership that they are going to implement the recommendations and aspirations of the citizens? Lastly is we must deal with the conflict of interest. A lot of times why the policy does not relate to the law and to the veto qua ground is because everyone who wants to be in office is looking at the next election and is saying, from MCA, I can be an MP, and then I can be a senator, then I can be a governor. Yeah. So they wake up thinking about that particular opportunity, other than the opportunity to change lives. And why is it so? Because then if you have milk farmers who are producing their milk, or fisher folks from Rarieda, Missouri Beach, where I come from, why must we get lorries from people in Thika to transport fish from Thika, to Thika from Rarieda? Why can't we have fish processing farms? So these are things that communities and the citizens have raised to government, but that commitment to be able to implement them is purely because we have conflicted leadership that is focusing on the next election other than the next generation, and we must therefore stop, insisting on changing people's lives, the pretense that we want to change people's life, but focusing on our own benefits and opportunities. Of course, 68 days to the election, Kenyans, we are praying for peace, and we are hoping that even as candidates come to us and focus on getting the last vote from ourselves, let's keep the conversation around what is the value of that vote. Of course, the vote is very, very important because Article 1 of the Constitution gives you that sovereign power. But ask yourself, beyond August 9th, so what for the people of Kenya? The question is, so what? And how do we, therefore, take a critical role in answering that question?
All right, Dennis, briefly.
I think one of the things that I've been asking myself is the president spoke of non-perfection. But then when you look at it, you ask yourself, where is the barrier? And the barrier that I identify most is lack of political goodwill. But then what stops you from willing to develop? It's the dilemma of interest within the public service. That you get into power, and then now you start self-aggrandizement, self-enrichment. You forget what took you into that public service. You forget the promises that you told Kenyans. And I agree with him in terms of the regional economic charters that UDA is doing. I can tell you one of the things that they have is the signature of William Ruto and all other leaders. But then I agree with you that it needs to find its way to the CIPD. Because if CIDP, because if it doesn't find its way there, then the governor will not be obligated to execute it. But I know that is one of the policies that every Kenya Kwanza governor is obliged to make sure that they adopt that economic charter into the CIDP. Now, that said, how then do we ensure that we enhance the progression of political goodwill? How do we make sure that when we say it is bottom up, it is bottom up at the end of the day? It doesn't, you don't win presidency and then it becomes something else. It is again going back to Article 1 of the Constitution, strengthening the Kenyan, the Mamamboga. Again, strengthening what it is that we call public participation, the oversight authority of the people. Is again ensuring that we have a healthy, independent parliament, healthy, independent Senate. We have an executive that is not going to overreach and manipulate those institutions. We have an independent judiciary at the end of the day. So whatever that is going to be the health check of the Kenya Kwanza government will be the independent and the health of commissions and arms of government. That is something that we must never repeat the sins of Uhuru. We must never ensure that we manipulate or we suppress independent commissions and arms of government. But at the end of the day, I have seen my own prosperity within those economic charters. Because I have before looked at it for it everywhere. I have not found my voice anywhere else. But at least, and I urge you to participate in one, because your voice will be heard, and at least you can question your governor who participated in that and say, but you spoke. So when are we getting into the CIDP?
Yeah.
When are we making sure that this progression is actually achieved?
Yeah.
You understand? Okay. Because sometimes there's a politician before elections and there's another politician after elections.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, we have to make sure
Yeah.
that it is the same person who achieves power.
All right.
I'll share with you some of the write-ups I've done.
Excellent.
For some of the people who speak in those meetings.
I'll be very interested
raised
to
those
study. I'll be
concerns.
very
All right.
interested. Yeah.
Thank you so much for making time this morning. Dennis Ndumi, governance and policy expert, and Kevin Osido, executive director, county governance watch. Asante sana. There's a lot of feedback. Let me try and squeeze in just 7 of them before we close up real quick there. There's Alan. Says it was so awkward and weird how Uhuru Kenyatta shows off and praises the security agencies and expensive weapons while the Kerio Valley residents are being slaughtered like goats. It pains. Okay. Wasi Daniel says Kenya's cost of living is too high. Insecurity in parts of our country is to the extreme. Sometimes I am worried where our leaders have no impact on life of the voters. And Frank Orinde says the president talked so much about corruption and hypocrisy. He went ahead to advise the next government to deal with corruption if at all they want to succeed. The question is, why didn't he deal with corruption? What was the problem? Okay. Jomo Felix says we are misinforming people, PPP investments, that it can be direct to agriculture, etc. Measures on global indicators can never be felt by footnotes. All right. We don't need